Welcome back. This is Matt from Jaggers Brewing Co. I've got revenge in my heart, and so it's Revenge of the Dubbel. So for today's project, it's going to be basically a rebrew of a Dubbel. The first ever Dubbel that I brewed, and I was still semi-unfamiliar with the style guidelines of it. I had a few commercial examples, all Trappest examples, and so I decided to take a stab at it. I went ahead and I entered it in a brewing competition. I got my feelings hurt. Looking back on it, there was some good critiques about it, and so it took a little bit to kind of be able to diagnose kind of what some of the problems were with it. It was a little out of style. It was a little boozy. It was a little bit more boozy than it should have been. There were some problems with it. The number one complaint, though, on the beer was it lacked complexity. So, them saying that it lacked complexity, I was like, oh, I'll show you complexity. And boy, howdy did I ever. Let's pour this beer. Let's let it sit here for a few moments while we talk about it, and then we'll see what it looks like, what it tastes like, what it smells like, and talk about it. So if I remember correctly, I believe that it scored about a 34 or 36, which you would have thought that I would have been prepared enough that I would have wrote it down and been able to talk about it, but I in fact did not. So this was a pretty fun brew to kind of pull it together. I asked for some advice on a bunch of different aspects to really try to push that complexity as much as possible. As you can see, it's got a really nice color, and I believe that that color is within the ratio, the spectrum that it should be. This is the inappropriate glass for this style. If you watch some of the previous shenanigans that I have gotten into, you know that they are probably some of my favorite Trappest brewers. Head dissipates a little bit. On the quick side, I would say it's probably about average for it, the style that I've had thus far anyways. And what does it smell like? So right off the top, I get the maltiness, I get the sweetness of it. I feel like I'm getting some apricot and some cherry notes to it. Maybe even some oxidation along the lines of the sherry type notes. So it looked pretty good. I feel like that the aroma is within the spec. I think that the carbonation is within spec. Head retention is probably about average, maybe a little bit lower than it ought to be. But what does it taste like? So right off the top, I do think that it is a little bit thinner than it should be as far as the style guidelines go. My two favorite examples of this style are the Rochefort and then the West Malt. I kind of prefer the Rochefort over the West Malt personally. I feel like it's a little bit more of a delicate beer. I do think that that one's a little bit thinner personally, as far as the mouthfeel and stuff goes. But we did some tricks to this to get it to where it's at. This thing turned into be a total grain bomb. The recipe will be in the description. Outside of the everything in the kitchen sink aspect of the grain bill and the grain bomb that it turned out to be, we tried to dial in that candy sugar. I think the last candy sugar that I used on the first brew, it was kind of incorrect. It was a little bit too dark, too heavy, and I think that that's why I had some of the problems that I had. But to add that whole extra division or the extra complexity that I was looking for and trying to really push, I had this brilliant idea because Belgian Dubbels are mostly bottle conditioned, especially the Trappest ones. And so I was like, you know what? Let's run an experiment and let's add that experiment to this beer and see what happens. So if you go back and look at the video Yeast Thief, you could probably start to tell what was going on there. I took some yeast out of those bottles. I got 2 Rochefort and 2 West Malts, built up a very small little starter just to kind of test to see if it was going to ferment out a little bit, and it worked well. So I started that project over, and then grabbed 2 more bottles of each beers, because why not? And so I saved that yeast for a little bit. I think probably about a month into it, that's when I started to really kind of come together with the yeast culture to ferment this out. And so what I did was the first Dubbel that I brewed, it also fermented out a quad. And so I took the yeast cake off of that and I saved it and I drained all the beer off of it. And so it was just a bunch of yeast and some trub in there. So I worked up a starter between that and the saved yeast from the Trappest ales. And that starter, it kind of took a minute to get going. That yeast, you know, had been kind of stressed on both being bottle conditioned and then having done a Dubbel and then a quad and just kind of blending them together. So it took a little minute for it to get going. And whenever I started that starter for it, you know, I kind of did it on a lower level. I think I shot for about a 1020, 1025 gravity starter just to kind of ease it into fermentation. And then after that, then I kind of upped it for another starter at like a 1030. After that, because I no chill, I brought my kettle in after brewing, and I drained off a little bit of it, and like I just crashed that flask just to get it down as quick as possible, and I pitched that wort onto my yeast starter as like a vitality type starter just to get it going. And so I think that really like vigorous fermentation that I experienced during this fermentation is due to that huge starter that I started off with, and with all the sugars that were in that kind of like vitality starter for this, I think it really worked out to have a good strong fermentation for this thing. Like I said, kind of a little on the thin side, but I think that it tastes amazing. Now there is a little bit of a sour tart type note here, and so it goes into like that maltiness, sweetness at the beginning, and then you kind of just have all these flavors that are similar to, like, say, you know, the raisins and whatnot. Almost wine-like. And then it comes into the ending note being kind of like tart, almost sour cherries. And I had this with a professional brewer, and he said that he felt like too that it was kind of almost like that sherry note, like kind of like that good oxidation that you want on some of the bigger, heavier, you know, beers and drinks like that sherry note. So going over some of the basic notes of this particular brew, we used a local Belgian water profile that was found in Beersmith. We also, in addition to kind of just starting to add complexity after complexity after complexity to this particular beer, and the grain bomb that it turned out to be, I took a portion of the Bohemian Pilsner malt, and I home roasted some of that to kind of help substitute some of the like crystal type malts and things like that I saw that were some other people were using. I had used some of the Bohemian Pilsner malts in some experiments before, and I toasted some of it and it was really delicious, and so I was hoping that some of those characteristics would cross over into the beer. The boil additions consisted of Styrian Golding, 17.2 IBUs at 60 minutes. Then we used the good old Saaz, 4.4 IBUs at 20 minutes. Whirlfloc Tablets at 15, Yeast Nutrient at 10, and then the D90 Candi Syrup at the last 5 minutes of the boil. I did that so that hopefully it would be sterilized, and then too, like, I wouldn't get a lot of that like burnt sugar that I've seen a lot of people kind of complain about. Now, I've used some candy sugars before. I didn't really experience any of that like kind of burntness that people said that they picked up on, but there again, you know, I'm still trying to learn things as I go. All in all, really, like, I really like this beer. I went all out on it, thinking like, okay, it's only going to score either a 25 in competitions or it's going to score a 45. My goal for this beer was hopefully to score at least 40 to 42 on it for one particular competition. When I brewed this, it was for that competition that I had previously entered, and they beat me up on it. And their specialty brew really, or their specialty competition really, is for Belgian style beers. And so I thought, you know, Revenge of the Dubbel, it's got to go in that competition. I'll show you complex. And I think there's definitely complexity there. I've entered it a little bit into a couple other competitions, still waiting for some score sheets to come back on that. The first one that I got back on it didn't score that well. I mean, it is what it is. we'll see how that one goal beer was. This thing, part of the idea for when I went to go enter it too was that the style works best being bottle conditioned. And so I planned it out to where basically this beer would be almost a year old when I entered that particular competition. Now the last time that I had this beer, it was right around 6 months old. And the flavor changing throughout the process of it, like bottle condition and bottle aging, it's kind of really started to pick up a little bit of that sherry note. So I am a little bit worried that we got a little bit of oxidation in the bottling process of this. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out through the rest of the time. Like I said, it's starting to approach on that year-long or year-old bottle conditioning aspect of it. I did also experiment a little bit with waxing bottles for long storage on this beer, and so maybe there's a test maybe what we should do between a waxed edition and a non-waxed edition. But that was an experience to find out that, because I thought, I was like, what's the big deal? It cannot be that difficult to wax. You just gotta throw the wax in a pot and dip it in there, for God's sakes. And it turns out it's a little bit more complicated than that, and that I should have looked into that before just thinking that how hard can it be. So I learned some stuff there, and going forward, whenever I try to attempt to do that again, I have some previous experience to tell me to do things differently. Wrapping it up, I mean, I really like this beer. I don't think it's going to be everybody's cup of tea. I was trying to shoot for something that's between my two favorite Dubbel examples. I feel like I got something that's complex, yet it does have an area of delicacy to it. I think that if it's not to style guidelines, that is damn close. And this is going to be one of those examples that I feel like even if it gets beat up, it's a cold beer, I like it, what does it matter? This was a long brew day. It was complicated. It was one of the first times that I used my cooler mash tun and I had a stuck mash, I had a stuck sparge. I woke up at the right before sunup, and I had already had everything outside, and I got after it, and it was I don't know, 3 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon before I was completely done with everything, and I was wrapping everything up. It was just a long day. I do now. Granted, this was almost a year ago. I do remember missing some gravity points on this, and so I've got a little bit of work to do, and on that mash tun cooler. Trying to figure out where my efficiencies are and where they should be. Part of the problem was that I didn't have a sparge arm, and so that led to some complications. So now that I'm finally starting to kind of iron out that system, maybe I'm going to use it a little bit more often. But other than that, I mean, I legitimately cannot be happier with this beer. I think that it shows a lot of creativity, at least on my part, if not insanity to some degrees. Thank you so much for coming along on my homebrew journey. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe, please like, please share, please comment. Let me know what you think about the recipe. Did I go totally crazy with those toasted Bohemian Pilsner additions that I did? Did I go freaking nuts with the yeast experiment that I did? Cheers, y'all. Welcome back. This is Matt from Jaggers Brewing Co. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is Matt from Jaggers Brewing Co. Today's project, Revenge of the Dubbel, because I got revenge in my heart. Welcome back. This is Matt from Jaggers Brewing Co. Today's project is a Dubbel about revenge, because you know why.